It was November 1st of 2008, and two boys aged 14 and 9 in Sydney, Australia, made a gruesome discovery while canoeing in the Georges River. They found the body of a man rolled up in the carpet. He was bound with electrical wires and an extension cord, and the carpet was held in place with strips of wire. Police say the clues suggest the killer was someone in the building or electrical industry. The body was identified as 27-year-old Chen Liu, originally from China, who had moved to Melbourne in 2000 before relocating to Sydney in 2004. He had a boyfriend and had been reported missing by a friend 2 weeks prior to him being discovered. Cheng's body was brought to be examined, and the X-ray revealed his horrifying cause of death. He had been shot in the head, but not with a regular gun. 33-inch nails were found in his skull. The nail gun used in the murder was a standard cordless gas-charged gun which was widely available for sale and hire. It's believed that Chen had been murdered in another part of Sydney before being driven in his own Blue Range Rover Sport by his killer to the Georges River. He had no known enemies and had no connections to any criminal networks, so it's unknown why someone would want to do this to him. Nobody has ever been charged with this disturbing crime, and Cheng's slaying remains unsolved. This is Canny Ong Kian, a 28-year-old IT analyst from Malaysia living in the United States. She and her husband Brandon resided in San Diego. In 2003, Canny's father Ong Bi Zheng was diagnosed with cancer, and on June 1st, she and her husband travelled to Malaysia to be with her family. Thankfully, things seemed to be taking a turn for the better as her father's condition had improved. At this point, it was June 13th, 2003, the day before Canny was due to fly back to the US. That night, she, her family and close friends were out having dinner at the Mond restaurant in the Bangsar shopping complex in Kuala Lumpur. It was a farewell dinner, as who knew how long it would be before she returned to Malaysia. After the meal, seeing that her mum had become tired, Canny offered to drive her mother back home before she continued with the farewell party. Canny returned to the car in the basement to pick up a parking ticket, while her mother and sister waited at the autopay machine. After waiting for 20 minutes, her mother and sister became worried. Her sister made 2 calls to her phone, the first was not answered while the second went to voicemail. Together they both went to the car park and found their car, a purple Proton Tiara, missing. After pleading with security guards, the mother, the elder sister, and Canny's friends viewed the CCTV footage and saw Canny being abducted by an unidentified person. Days later, on June 17th, Canny's burnt body was found by construction workers. She was found with a cloth around her neck, her hands crossed over her chest and her legs dangling out of the hole. The police, having received reports of Canny Ong's disappearance, arrived at the scene and brought the body for forensic tests. Her family was contacted to identify her body. The abandoned Proton Tiara was also discovered by police. An autopsy revealed that Canny was strangled before her body was set alight, and there was also evidence of her having been SA'd. After an investigation, police arrested 27-year-old Ahmed Najib Aris and charged him with the murder. He confessed to kidnapping Canny from the car park that night, where he took her to an isolated area. He had his way with her, before stabbing her twice, killing her. Her body was then pushed into a narrow hole on the side of the highway, and overlaid with 2 large tires containing cement. The car was abandoned at a nearby shop house. The killer then fled in a taxi. The next day, Ahmed Najib Aris bought petrol with a plan to burn the body. He went back to the hole and poured oil and burned the corpse. On February 23, 2005, after a trial that lasted 52 days, Ahmed Najib Aris was found guilty for Canny's murder and sentenced to death. Ahmed Najib Aris was executed by hanging a decade later, on September 23, 2016. The worst thing is that Canny's life could have actually been saved that night. On midnight the day she went missing, 2 plainclothes policemen patrolling on a motorcycle found a Proton Tiara, and upon approaching it they saw Ahmed and Canny in the car. One of the officers showed his police ID and asked to see their identification cards, which they handed over. They were then asked to get out of the car, but Ahmed refused and stopped Ong from getting out of the car. During the trial, it was revealed that Ong had made a series of strange hand gestures towards the police, apparently trying to seek help from the officer, but he could not understand the gestures. Ahmed then noticed this and quickly drove off. The policemen, who still had their IDs, quickly fired shots at the car, attempting to give chase, but they lost sight of it. The purpose of a mother is to be a caring influence in a child's life, someone who nurtures and raises them to become upstanding members of society. And whether you personally have a good relationship with your mother or not, just be glad that you weren't the child of this monster. Her name is Hakyung Lee, and she's a South Korean national living in Auckland, New Zealand with her husband and 2 kids. In 2017, her husband passed away due to cancer, and she became a single mother who looked after her kids. On August 11, 2022, human remains were found in 2 suitcases in an abandoned storage unit in Geyland Bahru, a suburb of Auckland. The suitcases were bought by a family as part of a storage unit auction from safe store Papa Toto. The family brought the suitcases home along with other household objects. Police believe the family who bought the suitcases were not related to the murders. The victims were identified as 8-year-old Yuna and 6-year-old Minu Jo, and they were believed to have died 4 years prior to them being discovered. Yuna and Minu were the children of Hakyung Lee. But at the time of the discovery, Hakyung was no longer in New Zealand. She had actually returned to South Korea in 2018 and was extradited back to New Zealand to face justice. She claims her innocence to this day and denies being responsible for the slaying of her children. The trial was meant to begin on the 29th of April, but for unknown reasons, the trial was delayed and will apparently remain that way indefinitely. This picture doesn't have a whole lot of information. Definitely not as much as the previous stories I've discussed in this video. What is known is that this picture was taken in Mongolia in 1913 and shows a woman being condemned to die in what is believed to be a portable prison. This was a common punishment in Mongolia at the time. It's unknown who this woman is or what exactly she did to warrant dying of starvation, although some sources state that it was due to adultery. Regardless, it's a bit eerie that her last moments on this earth are immortalized forever in this photograph. On January 6, 1979, one of Singapore's most haunting unsolved crimes took place in the suburb of Geyland Bahru. At 6:35 am that morning, Tan Quen Chai and Lee Mei Ying left for work. Meanwhile, their 4 children, Tan Kok Peng, aged 10, Tan Kok Hin, aged 8, Tan Kok Soon, aged 6, and Tan Chin Ni, aged 5, were still asleep. The 3 boys were students at Bendemeer Road Primary School, while their younger sister attended a local kindergarten. At 7:10 am, their mother phoned them 3 times to wake them up, but she received no answer. She proceeded to ask a neighbour to help wake the children. The neighbour knocked on the door but received no reply. Concerned, the couple returned home after 10 am and found the bodies of their children in the bathroom. They had been left piled on top of each other in their t-shirts and underwear, with slash wounds on their heads. The right arm of Kok Peng, the oldest child, had been almost severed, while Ching Ni, the youngest, had slash wounds on her face. The children were reported to have at least 20 slash wounds each. The police concluded that the murders were premeditated, and that the killer or killers had taken care to avoid leaving evidence. However, there were bloodstains in the kitchen sink, and the killer or killers appeared to have cleaned themselves before leaving the flat. There was no evidence of forced entry, because the flat had not been ransacked and no items were reported missing. The murder weapons, which were believed to have been a cleaver and a dagger, were never found. It's also believed that Kok Peng, the oldest child, had put up a fight against the killers, as several strands of long hair were found in his right hand. An investigation was conducted by the Criminal Investigation Department Special Investigation Section. They weren't able to identify a motive, but inferred that the murders were motivated by some sort of vengeance. The police believed that the perpetrator or perpetrators had personal knowledge of the Tans and their circumstances. They seemingly were aware that Lee had undergone sterilization after the birth of her last child. 2 weeks after the murder, the Tans received a Chinese New Year card depicting happy children playing together with the words, "Now you can have no more offspring, ha ha ha," in Chinese. Whoever wrote the letter signed off as the murderer. The sender additionally addressed the parents by their nicknames, Ah Chai and Ah Eng, which amplified the theory that it was someone related or familiar with the family. The day after the murders, the children were buried at Choa Chu Kang Cemetery along with some of their belongings. Their parents subsequently seized their minibus business and started working at a company that produced PVC materials. The police interviewed over 100 people who were possible suspects. However, no one has ever been arrested and the case remains unsolved. The picture you see on screen is of Hirono and Kamino Wataoka. It was taken on August 5th, 1945, and they and their family lived in Hiroshima, Japan. Yeah, you probably know where this one's headed. Apparently, the family were preparing to evacuate the area and had hired a photographer to take pictures of the family home so that they could remember it by. But unfortunately, they never got the chance to escape. The next day, on August 6th, little boy was dropped on Hiroshima. Eldest daughter, Chizuko, aged 16, who was out of town working at a munitions factory on the day of the bombing, returned home to find her city in chaos and her family home destroyed. The bodies of Shigemi Wataoka and his daughter Hirono were found inside the home, badly burnt. Mother Mitsuko and little Kamino were outside in the rice field, where they were likely working at the time. The family's second eldest daughter, 12-year-old Keiko, who was participating in mandatory building demolition with her classmates, was also killed. Orchard Towers is a large 18-story building located in the heart of Singapore. During the day, the building functions as a retail and office-style building, but at night, it's used for more promiscuous reasons. On January 8, 2002, the bodies of 2 people were found in the boot of a silver Daewoo Chairman 400 in the car park of the tower. The bodies were identified as 46-year-old Ko Nai Guan and Guan's 29-year-old girlfriend Lan Ya Ming. Lang, who was Ko's girlfriend, was married with 2 8-year-old twin sons at the time of her death, while Ko himself was a father of 3 who was estranged from his wife. Ko died from strangulation and Lan died from suffocation. Lan's body was later reclaimed by her husband 10 months after her death, while Ko's family were able to recognize him from his Thai tattoos and reclaimed his body. Michael McRae was born in 1958 in Penshaw, County Durham, England. Despite dropping out of secondary school and having no O-levels to speak of, he was a talented businessman, and in the mid-90s he travelled to Singapore and became a financial advisor. McRae, who rented an apartment at Pinewood Gardens condominium in Balmoral Park, was said to have a lifestyle of throwing noisy parties near the pool of the condominium, which often drew complaints and annoyance from his neighbours. In 1998, McRae first met Ko Nai Guan, a taxi driver whom he formed a close friendship with. He even hired him as his personal driver 6 months after they met. Ko was formerly an electronics business owner whose business went bankrupt in 1989 after only a few years of operation. Ko was known to be a friendly and well-spoken individual to his friends, and his excellent services as a taxi driver gave him commendation and awards in 1997, with McRae paying him generously for his services. Ko moved into McRae's home in 1999 after he became estranged from his wife, and he later lived together with his girlfriend Lan Ya Ming. It was after midnight on January 2nd, 2002, when McRae gathered with Ko, Lan and his girlfriend Audrey Ong to drink champagne and celebrate New Year's from the day before. During the session, Ko spat at Ong and called her a slut in Chinese. McRae was angered about this and confronted Ko. Ko, who got pushed against the wall and punched on his face, retaliated by breaking a vase on his employer's head, but it only led to McRae kicking him, fracturing his ribs, before he held him in an arm lock to punch him repeatedly. During the fight, McRae used too much strength and it led to fractures in the bones around the throat, leading to 46-year-old Konai Guan dying from strangulation. Lon tried to attack McRae with a knife, but she was knocked unconscious by McRae and brought into Ko's bedroom. It was at 4:30 AM when McRae realised that Ko had died, after seeing that his body was cold and his legs turned purple. He and Lon tried to resuscitate Ko with CPR, but it was in vain. McRae spent the next 2 days trying to cover up Ko's death by gathering his belongings for disposal. He also enlisted the help of Gemma Ramsbottom and Augustine Justin Chiu during this period. Lan Ya-ming, who was locked in Ko's bedroom and fed some water, chocolate and cranberry juice, was pressured into revealing the whereabouts of Ko's cash, including the $20,000 bonus McRae had paid to Ko a month prior. On January 4th, 2002, McRae stuffed Ko's body and belongings into a wicker basket. McRae then tied 3 plastic bags around Lan's neck. The 29-year-old Lan, who was still alive at this time, later suffocated due to strangulation by the neck and died. McRae wrapped up her whole body with blankets and plastic strings before he and Ong placed the bodies of Lan and Ko into Ko's car and drove it into a car park at Orchard Towers where they abandoned it. Afterwards, they left for London the next day after obtaining air tickets for their destination. Months later, on June 21st, they were found in Melbourne, Australia, and Ong was extradited to Singapore immediately. But due to various legal loopholes, McRae wouldn't be extradited until 2005. Both were found guilty of the murders, and Ong was sentenced to 12 years on February 7, 2003. On June 29, 2006, McRae was sentenced to a total of 24 years in jail for 2 amended charges of culpable homicides, not amounting to murder, 10 years for each amended charge, and 1 charge of causing evidence to disappear, 4 years for the 3rd charge. Many members of the public believed that his sentence had been very lenient. He appealed to have his sentence reduced, but it was denied. However, he was promised that with good behaviour behind bars, he could be released early. And he must have been a model inmate, as on June 29, 2022, he was released on parole after serving 16 years in prison. He was 64 years old at the time of his release. Thanks for watching this video everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.